You just watched the 12 News gubernatorial debate. I'm digital reporter Adriana Rozas Rivera. Early voting starts October 19. The last day to cast your ballot is November 8 on Election Day. We're here to break down the debate between the two candidates, incumbent Governor Dan McKee and Republican businesswoman Ashley Kalus, meeting on the debate stage for the first time. We've got both campaigns on hand here to react, to tell us what they think their candidate did right this debate night. And first up, we have Alana O'Hare from the McKee campaign, communications director. Hi, Alana. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So give us your initial reaction. How do you think Governor McKee did tonight?
Well, I think that he did great, right? And we're feeling pretty good. The governor did what he always does. He gets up there next to his opponent and he lays out two things for voters. He lays out his accomplishments over the last 20 months, and he lays out his vision for Rhode Island's future over the next 4 years and beyond. And so what that is what we've said from the beginning, and it's important to think about where we were in March of 21 when he took office and where we are now. So it's important to put that into context. We went from worst to first in vaccinations. We now have one of the top recovering economies in the nation, and actually top in the Northeast, and we have the lowest unemployment rate that we've had in decades. And what's really important to remember too is that the governor has the experience, the leadership experience, and the knowledge of Rhode Island, and decades actually of public service here in Rhode Island, by the way, which is important to lead us through the next 4 years and beyond, so really continue that momentum. So I think that was laid out on the debate stage tonight, and we feel really good about it.
So for folks that might just be tapping into or tuning into this race late in the game, there's a few weeks left to make their decision. How do you think McKee differentiated himself from Kalus?
Sure. I think one of the main themes of this general election race is that the governor, he knows Rhode Island. Let's face it, he's been in Rhode Island, in Cumberland to be specific, for his entire life. His family is from here. They've had small business here. He went through public schools, Cumberland High School. I've said this story before, but it's a great story. Going through Cumberland High School, where his dad went, he met his high school sweetheart, Susan. They graduated together in 1969. They sent both of their children, Matt and Kara, to Cumberland High School. They all played basketball. Susan was actually a basketball cheerleader. And the rest of his career has been dedicated to public service in Rhode Island. And I think what stood out tonight and over the last few months really is that Ashley Kalus, quite simply, she doesn't know Rhode Island values and she doesn't know Rhode Islanders. And I think that was all on the table tonight.
So the ILO group contract came up during the debate. What would you say to viewers who are maybe concerned that there's an investigation happening into a contract that's tied to the McKee administration? Because Kalus really hammered that point home during the debate.
Yep, as we expected, and I will say too that was actually during the first question that those attacks came up, and we expected it. We didn't expect anything less, and I think the governor has made his position on that clear, that he followed the procurement process and no rules were broken. So I think it's important to listen to the governor, and we know that we can trust him when he says that, and that's it.
So they covered a lot of different topics during the debate. Ted Nesi and Tim White doing their moderating. Is there anything that didn't come up that you want to highlight about your candidate that viewers should know?
I think that they got to most of the big topics. Certainly, cost of living, as we know, is a concern for Rhode Islanders. It's a concern across the nation, and the governor was able to highlight the over $265 million in tax relief that he's already delivered for Rhode Islanders, and that does not include actually the more recent proposals to help with electric bills that will be coming this fall and winter. But I would like to ask, why Ashley Kalus thinks that Rhode Islanders can trust her when it comes to one of the most important issues for Rhode Islanders, for women and for all Rhode Islanders, truthfully, and that's abortion access and reproductive rights in Rhode Island. She said it again on the debate stage that she would veto a budget that contains the EACA, and that's in contrast to the governor, who from the get-go has supported a woman's right to choose. As soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, he signed an executive order to further protect women's rights and providers in Rhode Island. And as promised, he had his agencies under his direction include in their budget funding for the EACA. So as promised, that is in motion, and I think that the choice is pretty clear.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being with us, Alana. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. And up next is Evan Gillespie from the Kalus campaign. He's heading on over here. Why don't you stand right here next to me? I don't bite. Hi, how are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Glad to hear that you're doing well. So tell us, initial reaction, how do you think that Kalis did tonight?
I think Ashley did a phenomenal job. She's a Golden Gloves boxing champion, and she definitely took it to the governor tonight. I think there's a lot that he has to answer for in his first 18 months in this position, whether it's potholes that aren't filled, truck tolls still up. They should come down, those gantries. Whether it's the FBI investigation, he needs to release the subpoena. He should have done it already. Rhode Islanders deserve to see that. So I think as far as how tonight went, Rhode Islanders saw a clear contrast between someone who is unbeholden to special interests, who's only in this for the people of this state and to deliver them quality services, versus someone who time and time again has shown that he's really only focused on himself and helping his friends and family get multi-million-dollar contracts.
So let's talk a little bit about that, about how Kalis separated herself. You mentioned sort of some of the downsides that Kalis pointed out about McKee. What do you think are the things that Kalis has in her favor that really separate her that viewers should focus on at home?
Absolutely. I mean, she is a successful business owner, someone who came from absolutely nothing, which is inspiring. I think a lot of people see that kind of come from nothing story, who was a failing student in high school, was able to get her life together, went to Columbia, London School of Economics, took a medical practice with her husband from 2 employees to a multi-million-dollar successful practice. And then when COVID hit, she jumped into the front lines, came back to Rhode Island, moved her family here, was on the front lines, hired over 400 employees here in the state, and truly helped make us one of the most vaccinated states in the country. So I think, you know, when people are thinking about this decision, they should really think about her qualifications, which are exceptional. And they can contrast that with the governor's record of, honestly, failure. So I think when people are voting in 28 days from today, they have a chance to vote in someone who's an outsider, someone who is not beholden to special interest, and someone who can truly put the people first for the first time in a long time.
So you mentioned Kalis moving to Rhode Island when she got that contract on COVID testing and vaccination. That's been a sticking point in the campaign about how long she has lived in Rhode Island. There's questions about her residency. Target 12 uncovering that she listed in her Newport home as her second home just back in February. What do you say to viewers at home who are still questioning if she really knows the state well enough to lead it for the next 4 years?
Great question. I am with Ashley all the time, all across the state of Rhode Island, and we hear the same thing over and over again. And that is, we need a fresh face. We need new ideas, someone who is not beholden to anyone other than the people, to go in there and do what is best for the state as a whole, not for their friends and for their family. So I think as to how to answer that question specifically, I would say I think Rhode Islanders are okay with that fresh face, that new set of ideas, and that is what she brings to the table. And I think as someone who was born and raised in this state, I have seen career politician after career politician go into office, promise to do what's best, and then they end up selling out. And that's what Dan McKee has done. He has sold out the people of this state. If he wanted to, right now, he could suspend the 4.2% tax on electricity, and he could undo the 47% tax rate hike on electricity. And he will not do it. Why? Because he doesn't know the law.
So our latest polling released just last Thursday showed McKee had a healthy lead over Kalis. Do you think Kalis did what she had to do tonight to secure that win?
Let's just say I'd rather be the Kalis camp right now than the McKee camp.
All right. Well, anything else that didn't come up during the debate that you think viewers at home should know about your candidate?
Absolutely. I think that I've obviously gotten to know Ashley incredibly well, and she is an authentic, inspiring, beautiful person that really sees the best in government and democracy, and that is what she wants to do when she's governor, is just be a true public servant and deliver quality services on time, fix our education system, fix our economy, make Rhode Island the most affordable place to live, work, and raise a family. And honestly, this could be one of our last opportunities to do that for a long time.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Yep. So up next, we have our very own Ted Nesi here, politics editor, joining us now, fresh off the debate stage to de-spin here in the spin room. How you doing, Ted?
Good. That was an energetic debate, I would say.
I think I agree with you, and we'll get to that. But just first things first, just initial reaction. What's top of mind as you walk into our spin room?
Well, look, I think you have a very interesting dynamic here. You have an incumbent governor, very experienced politician. He's done, Tim and I counted, this is the 5th debate we've done with Dan McKee since 2014 because he's run for various offices. And Ashley Kalus, a new candidate, someone who we haven't seen on a debate stage before. These two have never been solo on stage before. This was the first debate. So, people might think I'm over harping on that, but those human elements of these debates I've realized make a big difference. I would say I don't think they went out for beers after the debate. It seems like there's no love lost between these two. Frankly, not a shock to me with the attack ads going back and forth and everything. And the question is always, and I always hesitate a little when we do this, Adriana, because I want to let the viewers and voters decide, but, did people hear something tonight that would shift them either away from Dan McKee to Ashley Kalus, since he's been up in the polls, or shift some of those undecideds into one of their columns? And in the end, politics is a simple game. You need one more vote than the other person, and that's what they're trying to do in any debate. And it sometimes takes a little while to see if someone accomplished that.
Yep, so that was actually my next question. You covered it a little bit. Is McKee going to hold on to his lead? Our last poll released on Thursday showed him polling at 45%,
Yep.
a healthy lead over Kalas's 32%, but 15% of those surveyed still undecided. So any topics jump out at you that you think might sway folks one way or the other?
Yeah, I think in the end, I think voters care about kitchen table issues more than anything, especially right now. We saw in our poll, we always ask people, what's the biggest issue for you in the election? In our poll, 40-something% singled out the cost of living. That's very high for one issue in a poll, unless you're in a time of a recession or something. So I'd imagine people at home were listening to the answers on energy costs, on housing. And, they sort of have different things they needed to accomplish there. Dan McKee needs to both defend his record, argue to voters who maybe don't know everything he's tried to do, what he says he's accomplished, and what he plans to do going forward. Ashley Kalus needs to, frankly, present as a governor, right? People don't know her. She started as an unknown in Rhode Island. Show not only that they can imagine her as governor, but she has plans for that. And I think, there were times I think they sparred so much, I wonder if the voter at home could totally follow exactly what they were fighting about. We do our best as moderators, but you also don't want to jump in too much. So I think, I think both of them felt pretty good coming out of it. I could tell when they really felt like they'd nailed one of their talking points or key messages. And I think the closing statements has always summed it up well. Dan McKee saying, hey, I'm the Democratic candidate in a state that generally leans more Democratic. Stick with me on that, and here's what we've done. Ashley Kalus saying, look at all the things you don't like about Rhode Island. There's nothing wrong with an outsider. Maybe it would help in Rhode Island. And so I think I'll be looking to see if that started to get it across to people. But the McKee team came in fairly confident because they had that lead in the polls.
So I always like to ask you about the bumps in the road for each campaign. Kalus facing some backlash, she has been in this election cycle about her residency. Does she know the state well enough to lead it for 4 years? How do you think she handled those questions about whether or not she is from Rhode Island?
Well, again, as always, in the end, I'll let the voters decide how they felt. I will say she clearly knew that question was coming. I think, of course it did. It's been the biggest probably knock on her in this campaign is that she just got to Rhode Island too recently to run for governor. I think she made her case. Massachusetts is not that far away, and that's where she grew up. She has a vision for the state. Why shouldn't she be able to lead it? But you could tell Dan McKee he was raring to go on that topic. He had his list, his timeline of when she arrived in Rhode Island, and it's a contrast. Dan McKee is a Rhode Island lifer. He has the accent to prove it, which I say with affection for Rhode Island accents, of course. So I think they think if there's one thing where they know he has the edge, it's duration of life in Rhode Island, and they think that matters in a state like Rhode Island where people are very tied to the place. But I think Kalus wasn't surprised by that. Why would she be? And so I think she had her message to address it, and it's up to the voters to decide if they felt that was enough for them and they would be okay with someone who's fairly new to the state being the governor.
So Kalus, in contrast, was raring to go on the ILO group contract topic. McKee has faced this, he did in the primary, so it's not a new issue for his campaign. Do you think he did better this time around in answering those questions than he did, for example, in our primary debate?
Well, look, transparency. Obviously, people who watched the debates saw Tim White and I did take issue with one of his answers because we felt it had mischaracterized our reporting, and we're never going to allow that on the debate stage. But I think Dan McKee, he made the argument he's made all along that the FBI investigation is into the contract. He has no evidence it's into him personally, nor have the reporters found that, and he was in an emergency. And while he never explicitly says that, I think his argument is, did we cross every T, dot every I? no, I needed to get people vaccinated, I needed to get the schools open, and I wanted people I trust. In the end, that's his answer. Ashley Kalus, of course, says government just can't work that way, where someone can get a contract who you had some connections to and knew about, et cetera. So I think, basically you heard Dan McKee's bigger argument, I think that was interesting, was him saying, nobody mentions this to me on the campaign trail. He clearly just does not think this is an issue voters are going to make their decisions on. And frankly, if he has a lead in the polls, he may be right. We're going to find out as those undecideds start to decide which way they're going to go in these final weeks.
So you mentioned that tense moment between you and Tim and the governor. Folks might not be following the ins and outs of every single argument between the press and politicians. Can you break down that moment? Like, can you explain to us what was mischaracterized about the reporting?
Just the fact that my memory, and I'd have to watch the tape, so I want to be clear, but I believe the governor suggested that that the reporting had not indicated it was a contract for up to $5.2 million. And as Tim says, I can point to it. We've always said up to $5.2 million was the value of that contract. So that just isn't a correct factual statement to say that that's not true, which is why, in the end, we do want to leave a lot of room for a true debate, go back and forth. But there's an old saying, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. And we kind of see that as our role as the moderator, to try to keep it grounded in the facts as best we can. We're not perfect, but as best we can. And then let them debate what should be done, because that isn't a fact, that's an opinion.
All right, Ted. Well, as always, thank you for coming here to D-Spin. That's it for us tonight, folks. Next Tuesday, we're live at PPAC with the 2nd Congressional District debate. I'm Adriana Rozas Rivera, 12 News.